What if I told you that every prayer you've ever spoken, every sacred word you've uttered in devotion, carries within it a hidden command, one that wasn't placed there by the divine, but by something far older, far darker? Tonight, we're going to expose 6 words that have been woven into every major religion on earth. 6 words that the ancient Gnostics called the Archonic seal. A linguistic trap designed to keep your consciousness locked in a cage you can't even see. Type "I am awake" in the comments right now if you're ready to see what's been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. And if this video resonates with your soul, hit that like button, because what you're about to discover has been suppressed, ridiculed, and buried by those who benefit from your spiritual imprisonment. Right now, in churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues across the world, millions of people are unknowingly repeating these 6 words, never realizing they're speaking an invocation that doesn't reach the heavens. It feeds something else entirely. The ancient texts called them the Archons, the rulers of this realm, entities that exist between the material and spiritual worlds, harvesting human consciousness through belief, through ritual, through language itself. You see, words are not just sounds. They are vibrational commands, agreements written into the fabric of reality. And when billions of people across millennia repeat the same phrases with emotional intensity, with desperation, with hope, they create an energetic circuit, a feeding mechanism that these beings have exploited since the dawn of organized religion. Tonight, we're breaking that circuit. We're going to trace these 6 words back to their source, understand why they were embedded into sacred texts, and most importantly, I'm going to show you how to recognize them in your own spiritual practice. Because once you see the cage, you can never unsee it. And once you stop speaking their language, everything changes. This isn't about destroying your faith. This is about purifying it, about reclaiming the direct connection to the divine that these parasitic forces have intercepted for far too long. Stay with me until the end. Because what you learn in the next 15 minutes will fundamentally alter your relationship with the sacred forever. To understand how these 6 words infiltrated every major religion, we must first journey back to a time before organized faith existed. Back to the ancient world of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the mystery schools that guarded humanity's most profound spiritual secrets. In those days, approximately 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, there existed a knowledge so powerful that it was only whispered in initiation chambers, carved on hidden temple walls, and passed from master to student under oath of silence. The Gnostic teacher Valentinus, who lived in the 2nd century, taught his students that the Archons couldn't create. They could only imitate and corrupt. They couldn't access the true divine source, so they constructed a counterfeit system, a simulation of spirituality that looked like connection, but was actually extraction. And their most brilliant innovation wasn't building temples or writing scriptures. It was hijacking language itself, embedding specific phrases into the emerging religious traditions that would program humanity for the next 2,000 years. Now here's what makes this truly fascinating. When we examine the formation of the world's major religions between 500 BCE and 500 CE, what historians call the Axial Age, we see something remarkable. Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and the codification of Hinduism all emerged during relatively close historical periods, and they all began to centralize spiritual authority away from direct personal experience and toward institutional interpretation. The shamanic traditions, the mystery schools, the direct gnosis practices, they were systematically replaced with hierarchical structures that required intermediaries between humans and the divine. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered around the same time as the Nag Hammadi texts, reveal that even within Judaism, there were competing factions: the Essenes, who practiced direct mystical communion, and the Pharisees, who emphasized ritual, law, and prescribed prayer. The Essenes lost. Their practices were absorbed, sanitized, and transformed into something more controllable, more predictable, more useful for the Archonic agenda. In the Pistis Sophia, another Gnostic text, there's a fascinating passage where the Archons are described as having placed seals upon the souls of men and bound them with words of power that they might not know their true origin. This wasn't metaphorical to the Gnostics. This was a literal description of how consciousness could be imprisoned through linguistic programming, through the repetition of specific phrases that created energetic contracts. The brilliant deception wasn't to create entirely false religions. No, that would be too obvious, too easy to reject. Instead, the Archonic influence worked through infiltration, taking genuine spiritual truths and wrapping them in layers of distortion, embedding commands within prayers, hiding traps within sacred verses. It's like poisoning a well by adding just enough toxin that people don't notice the taste, but over time, it weakens them, makes them dependent, makes them unable to find clean water anywhere else. When Constantine unified Christianity in 325 CE at the Council of Nicaea, dozens of Gospels were excluded from the official canon, particularly those that emphasized direct gnosis, personal revelation, and the idea that the kingdom of heaven was within, not accessed through institutional authority. When the Prophet Muhammad's teachings were codified into rigid jurisprudence decades after his death, the mystical dimensions of direct divine communion were gradually overshadowed by legalistic interpretation. This pattern repeats across traditions: the institutionalization of the mystical, the replacement of experience with obedience. The 6 words we're about to examine appear in slightly different forms across these traditions, but their vibrational signature, their energetic function, remains consistent. They create dependency, they externalize power, they position the speaker as subordinate to invisible forces that may not be what they claim to be, and most dangerously, they program the subconscious mind to accept limitation as spiritual truth, to mistake surrender of sovereignty for devotion, to confuse repetition with connection. Now we arrive at the revelation that will fundamentally shift how you perceive every prayer, every mantra, every sacred invocation you've ever spoken. The 6 words that have been planted across religions operate not as a single phrase, but as a conceptual framework, a pattern that repeats in different languages, different traditions, but always carries the same energetic signature. These words are: "Thy will be done, not mine." You've heard variations of this everywhere. In Christianity, it's embedded in the Lord's Prayer: "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." In Islam, the constant refrain is "Inshallah," if Allah wills it. In Hinduism and Buddhism, it appears as complete surrender to karma, to fate, to the cosmic order that must not be questioned. On the surface, these phrases sound like the ultimate spiritual humility, the ego dissolving before the infinite. But here's what the Archons understood that most humans don't. There's a profound difference between alignment with the divine and the abdication of your divine nature. Think of it this way. Imagine you're a powerful creator being, infinite and sovereign, temporarily inhabiting a human body to experience this dimension. Now imagine that from the moment you can speak, you're taught to repeat phrases that essentially say, "I have no power, I have no will, I am nothing before external authority." What happens energetically when billions of souls repeat this programming thousands of times throughout their lives, with emotional intensity, with tears, with desperate hope? They create an energetic broadcast, a signal that says, "I am powerless, come rule me, come decide for me, I surrender my sovereignty." The Gnostic text called The Reality of the Rulers describes how the Archons cast a trance upon Adam and created Eve from his rib as a distortion of the original story. A story where humanity was tricked into forgetting they were divine beings with creative authority. The real forbidden fruit wasn't knowledge. It was remembering that you are a creator, that your consciousness shapes reality, that you were never meant to bow before external authorities, but to recognize them as equals or, in the case of the Archons, as inferior beings masquerading as gods. Let's break down each pair of words in this 6-word formula and understand their function. Thy will. This externalizes divinity completely. It places the source of power, wisdom, and decision-making outside of you, in an unknowable, unreachable other. Now you might say, but God is greater than my small human ego. And you'd be right. Your ego is not who you truly are, but neither is thy will, referring to the true infinite source. In the Archonic framework, thy will refers to the will of the entities who positioned themselves between humanity and the true divine. The intermediaries who demand worship, who require blood sacrifice, who threaten eternal punishment, who display all the characteristics of narcissistic tyrants rather than unconditional love. The true divine source doesn't require your submission. It invites your collaboration. It doesn't demand you erase your will. It asks you to align your will with the highest good, which includes your own flourishing. The ancient Hermetic principle, as above, so below, wasn't about hierarchy. It was about fractals, about how the divine pattern exists at every scale, including within you. When you say, thy will, you're unconsciously agreeing that the pattern above is superior and you are inferior, breaking the Hermetic mirror. Be done. These words carry the frequency of passivity, of waiting, of being acted upon rather than acting. In the ancient mystery schools, initiates were taught that consciousness creates reality, that observation collapses quantum possibility into manifestation, that your attention is the paintbrush of the divine artist within you. But be done programs you to wait for something external to act, to shape, to decide. It trains you to be an observer of your life rather than the author of it. Consider the linguistic difference between be done and I create, or I align, or I co-create. The first is passive voice. Something happens to you. The second is active voice. You are the agent of change. The Archons understood that language shapes consciousness, and passive language creates passive people, people who wait for salvation, for permission, for external validation before they claim their power. Not mine. And here is the final seal, the ultimate negation. With these two words, you literally speak into existence the denial of your divine authority. You proclaim that your will, your inner guidance, your direct connection to Source is somehow wrong, corrupt, untrustworthy. You've just agreed that you cannot trust yourself, that your inner voice is deceptive, that you need external authority to tell you what is true. This is precisely how the Archonic system maintains control, by convincing divine beings that they are powerless sinners, that their natural impulses are evil, that their direct knowing is delusion. Once you've accepted not mine, you've handed over the keys to your consciousness. You've agreed to let someone else, some priest, some institution, some invisible entity, decide what your will should be. The ancient mystics knew something that's been deliberately obscured. You are not separate from the divine. The drop is not separate from the ocean. It is the ocean experiencing itself as a drop. When Christ said, I and the Father are one, he wasn't claiming unique status. He was revealing the truth about all consciousness. When the Upanishads declare Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, they're not being poetic. They're being literal. You are the divine experiencing itself through the filter of your unique perspective. Now let's go even deeper into why these 6 words are so insidious and how they appear in forms you've never recognized as the same trap. Because the archonic infiltration was far more sophisticated than simply inserting one phrase into one prayer. They understood that humans are diverse, that different cultures require different approaches, so they planted the same energetic virus in multiple linguistic containers, each tailored to the psychology of different traditions. In Buddhism, you won't find "thy will be done" explicitly, but you'll find something functionally identical: the concept of complete ego annihilation. The idea that your individual self is an illusion to be destroyed rather than transcended. Now, there's profound truth in recognizing that your ego is not your essence, but the archonic distortion takes this truth and weaponizes it. Instead of teaching you to expand beyond ego while retaining your sovereign consciousness, it teaches you that wanting anything, choosing anything, asserting anything is spiritual failure. The phrase becomes, "Not my will because I have no real self." See how the same trap operates under different philosophical clothing. In Islamic tradition, the constant invocation of "Inshallah," if God wills, seems like beautiful surrender. And in its pure form, it can be an acknowledgement of uncertainty, of humility before the vastness of existence. But notice what happens in practice. It becomes a way to avoid responsibility, to defer decision-making, to wait passively for fate to unfold. I didn't get the job, inshallah. The illness didn't heal, inshallah. The phrase becomes a buffer between you and your creative power, a way to avoid asking the harder question: what is my role in shaping my reality? What power do I carry that I'm not acknowledging? The Sufi mystics, the Gnostics of Islam, understood this distinction perfectly. Rumi didn't write poetry about being a powerless speck before an angry judge. He wrote about divine union, about becoming the instrument through which the beloved plays music, about the human being as the very hands and eyes of God in this world. That's collaboration. That's co-creation, not negation of self. Here's where it gets truly revealing. Examine the moment these phrases appear in sacred texts. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when Christ says, "Not my will but yours be done," he's in a moment of absolute terror, facing torture and death, asking if there's another way. The conventional interpretation is that this represents perfect submission. But what if we read it differently? What if this moment captures the human Jesus, afraid and seeking guidance, but the story ends not with passive acceptance but with active choice? He doesn't stay in the garden waiting to be arrested. He goes to meet his fate. The will he aligns with isn't some external tyrant demanding blood sacrifice, but his own highest understanding of his mission. The archonic corruption took this moment of a man grappling with fear and transformed it into a universal commandment that you must always negate yourself, always doubt your inner knowing, always assume that what you want is somehow less holy than suffering. They took a human moment and turned it into a control mechanism. Now, let's examine something even more concealed: the neuro-linguistic structure of these 6 words and what they do to your brain. Neuroscience has discovered that when you speak in passive voice, when you use phrases that position you as the object rather than the subject of action, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, decision-making, and willpower, literally shows decreased activation. Meanwhile, The areas associated with anxiety, helplessness, and learned submission light up. The Archons didn't have MRI machines, but they had thousands of years of observing human consciousness, understanding that certain linguistic patterns create certain psychological states. By embedding passive, self-negating phrases into the most repeated prayers spoken morning and night, in moments of crisis, at births and deaths, they ensured that generation after generation would be neurologically programmed into helplessness. But here's what they couldn't fully control. Human consciousness is resilient, adaptive, and fundamentally sovereign. Throughout history, mystics have awakened to this trap and found ways around it. The Cathars in medieval France taught direct knowing and were exterminated by the Catholic Church. The Hermetic practitioners of Renaissance Europe encoded their knowledge in symbols and allegories. The Zen masters created koans, paradoxical riddles, specifically designed to break the mind free from programmed linguistic patterns. There's a famous Zen story where a student asks the master, "What is Buddha?" The master replies, "Buddha is a shit stick." This isn't blasphemy, it's a shock treatment, a way to shatter the reverential, submissive relationship to external authority that organized religion had created. It's saying, the divine isn't up there requiring your prostration, it's here, now, even in what you've been taught to consider lowest and most profane. The 6 words, "Thy will be done, not mine," also appear encoded in more subtle forms. Every time you say, "I'm blessed," instead of "I created this," you're speaking the code. Every time you attribute your success to luck, fate, or external grace while claiming your failures as personal inadequacy, you're reinforcing the pattern. Every time you pray for something to be given to you, rather than declaring your intention to co-create it, you're feeding the system. And here's the most sophisticated aspect of this trap. It's self-reinforcing. Once you've accepted that your will is corrupt and external will is holy, you interpret every moment through that lens. Good things happen? That's God's will rewarding your submission. Bad things happen? That's God's will testing you, or punishing you, or mysteriously working in ways you can't understand. You never, ever consider the third option. That you are a powerful being whose consciousness shapes reality, and you're getting exactly what you're broadcasting energetically through your beliefs, words, and emotional patterns. The ancient Egyptians had a concept called Heka, divine magic, and they understood it as the power of words to shape reality. Their hieroglyphs weren't just communication. They were literal invocations, spells, commands to the fabric of existence. When a pharaoh spoke his name, he was asserting his existence into reality. The power of the spoken word was so understood that in the Book of the Dead, the deceased had to speak the correct phrases to navigate the afterlife. Not because external judges demanded it, but because consciousness responds to declaration. This knowledge was stolen, inverted, and weaponized. Instead of teaching you that your words shape reality, religion taught you to repeat their words, their spells, their incantations, all designed to shape you into compliance, into energetic food, into a being who generates worship, fear, and supplication that feeds entities who couldn't access the true source directly, so they positioned themselves as intermediaries to harvest what flows through you. Now comes the most crucial part of this transmission. What do you actually do with this knowledge? Because understanding the cage doesn't free you. Only action, only practice, only the rewiring of your linguistic and energetic patterns can break these chains that have been forged over millennia. Tonight, you're going to learn the exact techniques that mystics, Gnostics, and awakened beings have used throughout history to reclaim their sovereignty and establish direct connection with the true divine source, bypassing the archonic interference entirely. First, we must engage in what I call the purification audit. For the next 7 days, I want you to become hyper-aware of every spiritual phrase that comes out of your mouth or through your thoughts. Carry a small notebook or use your phone. Every time you catch yourself saying or thinking something like, "If it's meant to be," "God willing," "Thy will be done," "I'm blessed," or "Please grant me." Write it down. Don't judge yourself. Don't try to stop yet. Just observe. You're going to be shocked at how many times per day you unconsciously speak the archonic code. This awareness alone begins to break the automated pattern, like suddenly noticing you've been holding your breath for years. Second, learn the language of sovereign creation. This is about replacing passive religious phrases with active, co-creative declarations. Instead of "Thy will be done," you say, "I align my will with the highest good for all beings." Feel the difference? You're not negating yourself. You're claiming your role as a conscious participant in the divine unfolding. Instead of "Please God, grant me this," you declare, "I call forth this manifestation in alignment with universal love." You're not begging an external authority. You're exercising your divine function as a creator being. Here's a powerful practice. Stand before a mirror, look into your own eyes, and speak these rewired declarations out loud. I am a sovereign expression of infinite consciousness. My will aligned with love is divine will. I create my reality in collaboration with the highest source. The first few times you do this, you'll likely feel resistance, maybe even fear or blasphemy. That's the programming fighting back. That's the archonic seal trying to maintain its grip. Push through. Speak it until your nervous system accepts it as truth. Third, practice the Gnostic shield meditation. The ancient Gnostics taught a visualization technique to protect consciousness from archonic interference. Sit in a quiet space, close your eyes, and visualize a sphere of golden white light surrounding your entire body, about 3 feet in all directions. As you breathe, see this light growing brighter, more solid, more impenetrable. Then speak this declaration, either aloud or internally. I am sovereign. I recognize no authority above the true infinite source, and I recognize that source as inseparable from my own consciousness. Any entity, thought form, or energetic pattern that seeks to diminish, control, or feed upon my energy is hereby denied access. I revoke all agreements, contracts, and vows made consciously or unconsciously that surrendered my power to external authorities. I am awake, I am free, I am divine. Do this meditation for at least 10 minutes every morning for 40 days. 40 days is significant. It's the amount of time required to begin rewiring neural pathways, to break old habit patterns. You're not just visualizing, you're literally reconstructing your energetic architecture, sealing the leaks through which your power has been drained. Fourth, rewrite your prayers. If you come from a religious background and prayer is important to you, you don't have to abandon it. You need to purify it. Go through your traditional prayers and identify every phrase that contains the 6-word pattern or its variations. Then consciously rewrite them in the language of collaboration rather than submission. For example, the Lord's Prayer could become, Divine Source that exists in the highest dimensions and within my own heart, I honor your sacred nature. I co-create with you the manifestation of heaven on earth. I call forth the sustenance I need. I offer forgiveness and receive it in equal measure. I navigate through challenges with your wisdom flowing through me. I recognize my power and my protection come from my unity with you. See how different that feels? You've maintained reverence, maintained connection, but you've removed the code that programs helplessness. Fifth, practice the technique of conscious questioning. The Archonic system relies on you accepting religious teachings without examination. Start asking dangerous questions. Why would an all-powerful, all-loving deity require worship? Why would the divine create humans with desires and then condemn those desires as sinful? Why would ultimate truth need intermediaries, priests, or institutions to access it? If God is infinite love, why does nearly every religion teach more about fear, judgment, and punishment? These aren't blasphemous questions. They're the questions that shatter illusions and reveal truth. Journal your answers. Don't accept the pre-programmed responses you've been given. Sit with the discomfort of not knowing, and let genuine understanding emerge from your direct connection to Source. Sixth, engage in the practice of sacred rebellion. Once per week, deliberately do something that breaks a religious rule that never made sense to you, but that you followed out of fear or conditioning. If you were taught that certain foods are spiritually impure, eat them with consciousness and gratitude. If you were taught you must pray at specific times, in specific ways, instead sit in silence and simply be with the divine in whatever form feels authentic. If you were taught your body is sinful, honor it, celebrate it, recognize it as the temple it truly is. You're not rebelling against the divine. You're rebelling against the control systems that were built in the divine's name. Finally, create your own sovereignty declaration, a personal statement of spiritual independence that you speak regularly. Here's an example to inspire your own. I am an eternal, infinite being of light temporarily experiencing this human form. I acknowledge the divine source of all creation, and I recognize that source flows through me, not above me. I reclaim all power I have given to external authorities, seen and unseen. I trust my inner guidance as the voice of my higher self. I create my reality through my consciousness, my words, and my actions. I am responsible for my choices and empowered to change them. I offer love freely but bow to no entity that demands fear. I am sovereign, I am awake, I am free. Write your own version. Make it personal, make it powerful, and speak it every single day until it becomes more real to you than any prayer you were taught to repeat. These practices aren't just mental exercises. They're energetic warfare against a system that has controlled human consciousness for millennia. You'll likely face resistance, doubt, fear, guilt, the sense that you're doing something terribly wrong. That's the programming fighting for survival. Push through with compassion for yourself, but absolute commitment to your freedom. We've journeyed together through one of the most dangerous and liberating revelations you may ever encounter. The understanding that the very words you've been taught to speak in your most sacred moments were never designed to connect you to the divine, but to disconnect you from your own divinity. 6 words, woven through every major religion, creating an invisible prison that has contained human consciousness for thousands of years. Thy will be done, not mine. Passive submission disguised as holy surrender. Energetic extraction masked as spiritual devotion. But here's what the Archons never anticipated. The truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. Consciousness, once awakened, cannot be put back to sleep. You now carry knowledge that millions of people will live and die without ever discovering. You understand that the divine source doesn't require your smallness. It celebrates your magnificence. You recognize that alignment with the highest good doesn't mean erasing your will. It means purifying it, directing it, wielding it as the creative force it was always meant to be. Tonight, when you close your eyes, you face a choice that every awakened being throughout history has faced. Will you continue speaking the language of your captors, or will you reclaim the language of your liberation? Will you keep praying prayers that drain your power into invisible entities who feed on your worship? Or will you speak declarations that reclaim your sovereignty and establish direct communion with the infinite source that exists both beyond you and within you? The ancient Gnostics were hunted to extinction because they taught these truths. The mystics were burned as heretics because they refused to bow before intermediaries. The shamans were called primitive because they maintained direct access to the spirit world without priests, without institutions, without the 6 words that seal consciousness into servitude. But their wisdom survived, hidden in symbols, encoded in myths, waiting for moments exactly like this, when enough souls were ready to hear it, strong enough to live it, courageous enough to speak it. So here's my challenge to you, and this is where everything changes. Tonight, before you sleep, do not speak a single prayer in the old way. Don't ask, don't beg, don't plead to external forces. Instead, sit in silence, place your hand over your heart, and simply acknowledge the divine presence that breathes through you in this very moment. Speak to it as an equal, as a beloved friend, as a co-creator. Tell the universe what you intend to create, what you choose to experience, what you commit to becoming. Feel the difference in your body, in your energy, in the space around you, when you stop diminishing yourself and start owning your power. And then watch what happens. Watch how synchronicities increase. Watch how your intuition sharpens. Watch how opportunities appear that were always there but invisible while you were operating from the frequency of powerlessness. This isn't magic. This is physics. This is consciousness reclaiming its natural function as the shaper of reality rather than the victim of circumstance. If this message has awakened something in you, if you feel the chains beginning to loosen, share this video with someone who's ready for this truth. Not everyone will be. Some people find comfort in their cages, safety in their submission. But there are others out there right now, searching desperately for the key to their liberation, and you might be the one who places it in their hand. Subscribe to this channel if you want to continue this journey into the forbidden knowledge, the suppressed wisdom, the dangerous truths that set consciousness free. Hit the notification bell because the deeper we go, the more resistance we'll face, both from external forces and from the programmed parts of ourselves that fear freedom more than captivity. And remember this final truth, the one that terrifies the Archons more than anything else. You were never powerless. You were never separate from Source. You were never meant to spend your life begging for scraps from entities who claimed to stand between you and the divine. You are the divine, experiencing itself through the magnificent filter of your unique existence. The kingdom of heaven isn't somewhere you go when you die. It's somewhere you create right here, right now, with every sovereign choice, every conscious word, every moment you refuse to speak the language of your imprisonment. The 6 words have held humanity captive long enough. Tonight, you stop saying them. Tonight, you speak a new language, the language of liberation, of co-creation, of divine sovereignty. And the universe, the true infinite source that has been waiting for you to remember who you really are, will finally hear your voice clearly, without the archonic interference, without the distortion, without the static of submission. Welcome home to yourself. Welcome to your power. Welcome to the beginning of your true spiritual awakening. Now go and create your reality consciously.